I just want to introduce our last speaker. We always like to bring somebody, and typically we'll bring a coach to kind of close out the workshop, and sometimes it's health related. And today we're offering some insight to a very real topic that I think, especially with COVID going on right now, it's just such a real topic between couples and ex-couples. So today's topic is how to communicate with your ex, how to say what you need and not say what you shouldn't. So we invited Sherry Morris to speak on this topic. Sherry is an attorney, mediator, and now a full-time divorce and conflict coach who supports individuals and couples as they navigate life transitions and difficulties involving conflict. She's an expert at facilitating productive and neutral communication. So if you have a conflict in your life that isn't working for you, divorce or not divorce related, Sherry will be happy to help create a shift so that you can focus on what's next and best for you. So thank you and welcome, Sherry.
Thank you so much, Elise. It's my pleasure to be here. And what terrific information that I've heard so far. And one of the things I want to start with, because it has been so much and so powerfully effective, but also a lot, is to ask everybody just to take a deep breath and just breathe in through your nose, exhale through your mouth, and just take a moment to really reset. Because I'm hoping what I can do here with you today is teach you potentially what might be a new set of skills and to focus on this communication piece, which can be so important as you contemplate, as you're in the middle of, as you're post-divorce. So sort of setting aside all of the, stuff about finances, which is so impactful, and what to do next and how you can shift orders. One of the most fundamental things you can do as you go through divorce or post-divorce is how do you communicate? How do you co-parent? And one of the things that's so important is deciding for you, not for your former spouse, but for you and for your children, if you have them, what do you say? And so as a jumping off point, I want to start with the idea that this is all about more self-care for you. And one of the fundamental principles I bring to all of my client sessions is, being right may not make you happy. And that's probably not a surprise to any of us at this juncture in our lives. But sometimes when we're going through divorce or post-divorce, it's really important to us to show that our spouse isn't right. And the data we have in divorce shows that really the only thing that hurts kids is conflict between their parents, whether they're married or divorced. So to the extent we can have a reset, have support we need, and not communicate in ways that don't serve us or our children, it's a really great idea. But how do we do that? It's hard. And so I want to start with the idea that anything you can't control in life is teaching you how to let go. And I think this is a really important idea for all of us in so many areas of our lives. But if we're talking about communication with a spouse or former spouse, the thing we need to know is we can shift ourselves. We will never shift them. They may never believe what we believe. They certainly aren't going to do what we tell them. Anyone who goes through divorce has probably experienced that. So don't tell them. Figure out a way to communicate what you need to about the kids or other matters in a neutral way, and never let them see that you get escalated about it. That's really, in a way, the sweetest spot in this area of communication. And recognizing that your lack of control exists allows you to start to let go. So let's begin with a goal in mind. This requires practice and skill and doing your own work. So we're not going to be there right away. What I want you to contemplate saying what you need to say to your spouse or former spouse. Don't say what you don't, and listen to what they're saying without being triggered. So get rid of the stuff they shouldn't be saying and really focus on the message. And that may be your job. Even if you never respond to their escalation, it may not feel validating to you, but you will be doing better work for you. So knowing this, I want to point out to you the reasons it matters what you say in divorce. And there are three simple ones. Divorce requires negotiation, and negotiation is helped by clear and neutral dialogue. Any of us who are escalated and trying to negotiate probably don't get as easily to the place we want to be. Your children will do best, as I said previously, if your conflict is low, and how you communicate plays a large role in this. And you are better served in the long run by preserving your resources for yourself, your children, and your future. And using the resources at hand presented here today about financial planning are so compelling and remind you why you want to be the best steward of your resources and not let it get out of hand. Even the best lawyers and the ones who want to de-escalate on your behalf have to charge you fees. So let's see where we need to spend those fees and where we don't. So how does poor communication hurt you specifically? So there are lots of things you may feel when communication is not going well. One thing you may notice is your heart rate's, escalating, it's increasing. You feel tension in your jaw and your chest, your body is tight, your body temperature actually rises. Your breath can become shallow and your, jaw tightens, as I said. So you physically are not in the best space, which, as we now understand, The Body Keeps the Score, which is a terrific book to read, as you suffer from any sort of physical conditions, it's really sometimes and can be an extension of emotional responses in your life. So what you might do when you're feeling this physical discomfort, you might create a verbal attack, you become defensive, you remind your ex of past history that doesn't have anything to do with what you're talking about now. You belittle the other person, you might shame them because you feel shame. You might feel uncomfortable in this moment. And you might just check out of the conversation. I'm not doing this. And that hurts everybody. So often I see this breakdown, during and post-divorce when we use the kitchen sink approach, which isn't really helpful. For example, you make demands. You must change the pickup drop-off time for the kids to accommodate my schedule. After all, the divorce is your fault. And if you hadn't done that, we wouldn't be in this situation. Or the all-time favorite, are you off your meds again? I can't negotiate with crazy. As you can see, these don't feel very good to be told these things, and it may feel immediately, momentarily vindicating to say them, but it also isn't likely to forward your position. So from a very practical position, it doesn't help you. So what can you do instead? There's a great method you can use, and I recommend it highly to all my clients, and then we practice it again and again and again. First of all, take a break to regain perspective. I really like it when my clients, unless there's an emergency with kids or other issues involved, they're not really texting at all. They're just emailing, because you don't need to be confronted with urgency when it doesn't exist. So when you get an email, maybe decide you're going to read these emails once a day at a particular time of day, when you're relaxed, but perhaps not under the influence of alcohol, and read the email, but then take a break and come back to it. You do not have to shoot off an answer. There are very few times where that has to happen. You get to reflect and respond. So when you do decide to respond, there's a method called BIFF. And it was developed by a very knowledgeable man called Bill Eddy, who now works with others too, to teach this very important communication method. It really works in any form, any area of escalation in your lives to help resolve conflict. And we'll talk about that. We'll talk about how to apply this. The acronym stands for BRIEF. Be brief in your response. Provide information, make it informative. Be friendly, not overly friendly, just hello, signed, all best, if you can manage that. And be firm, create clear boundaries in your communication so there's no reason to have a back and forth to the extent you're done with the negotiation. And then regain your equilibrium, because that's important, reset again, and then proceed with the rest of your life. Don't carry it around with you. Their burden is not for you. Let them hold it. You will do better in the long run if you can do that. So we're going to reiterate here that we want to begin with the end goal in mind. So when I work with a client, we start at the beginning by setting values that they have for the relationship they want to have with their soon-to-be former or former spouse. And then we create this network of wonderful people, lawyers, therapists, financial professionals, healthcare consultants that fall in line with these goals. And I'm always right there, right next to you to help you make sure that communication is productive. So in communication, what we're going to do is we're going to say what we need to say, hear what's being said to you, and try not to be triggered. And that takes skill and practice. And sometimes it takes therapy. And that's because on the therapist couch, virtually now, you can really explore what may have led you to the place to respond in this way. What we're doing together in the coaching practice is applying practical skills. So even if you're not feeling it, we're going to do it. And that may sound very harsh, but I am committed to saving you legal fees, to making sure your relationships with your financial professionals, your therapists, everyone else in your life, your former spouse, and especially your children, are good ones. And this is what it takes to do that. So I want to make sure you have a takeaway, real value added tips for 5 steps to clear and effective communication during divorce. First of all, and I touched on this before, remember their urgency is not your emergency. You don't have to respond right away unless it is an emergency. So don't. Take a deep breath and reflect before responding. Draft a brief, clear, and neutral response using a friendly tone, the BIFF method. Return to the communication before sending. So take a pause, come back to it. Update your response as needed and send. Breathe a sigh of relief and move on. I just saw a clever cartoon today, which is if you sign your email yours, it's not because you're saying all best or that you belong to the person, but rather email is now yours, done, moving on. And it's actually quite funny to think of in any context. But whatever method you use, you need to start moving beyond that communication. Don't hold on to that yourself. It hurts you and your kids. So sometimes we want to use a co-parenting app for communication. Both, can help you organize your communications, and for the process of divorce, the information can be stored and allows you to reflect upon what's gone on before. And sometimes working with an app and in conjunction with a divorce coach can help you understand your values and set those goals we talked about to plan your communication with your spouse. So contain this, treat it like any other business negotiation you might have, and teach yourself how to do better for you and your children. So effective communication requires you to value boundaries over being right. I started this presentation with this information. I think it's really important for you not to lecture your spouse, as you're unlikely to convince them of anything, especially during and post-divorce. You're no longer their intimate partner. You may be the last person they can hear things from. If needed, build in a deadline for action. I need to know by X date. And if no response is received, then you're going to do the thing that you said you would do. And that keeps you from chasing. And again, can be applied to many categories of communication, but especially effective if you have some emotional attachment to it. And remember that every communication is part of a negotiation with that someone who's no longer your intimate partner. And your influence now is likely severely limited, even if you're right. And again, remember, we can't control the other. We can only control ourselves. And that's a really powerful thing to know and to do. So best practices for divorce communications from a coaching perspective, from someone who's in the trenches every day, doing this with clients, helping individuals that I work with, but also couples to communicate better, whether they're co-parenting, figuring out if they want to separate or divorce, with family systems who have adult children with whom they have conflict, with siblings you may have conflict with. In these cases, this BIFF method works. So use email as the primary form of communication, save text messages for emergencies. Do your work to move past trauma triggers. Think about something like EMDR, another form of therapy that really digs into what may make you respond in the ways you do that aren't healthy for you. Stay child-oriented or issue-focused. Never use your children as messengers. Never, even if they're teenagers and old enough to do it. It's your job to communicate in a neutral way. So do that. And no lecturing, because again, when you lecture, they feel patronized. I know I do, and it just doesn't work. So it also escalates the conflict. And in your communication, use a neutral and friendly tone. So I hope this brief presentation helped you see how you might shift conflict that you might have in your relationships. I am, of course, happy to have any questions and to try to answer those today that you may have. But I also always offer a free consultation for about 20 minutes. So you can reach me at these two sites and emails. And I promise I will do my very best to help you communicate, co-parent, and take care of yourself and your children.